So this was the original M2. A discussion of the contract award for the Brook Run Dog Park construction with Brent Walker. Present.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm not going to go into a lot of the history of where we are now with the dog park. I'm sure everybody in front of me and behind me knows where we got where we are. Where we are with the project basically is we resubmitted the bid after the December meeting. We put the bid back out on the street to see if we could reduce the cost through some value engineering of the scope of work, which we wrote into the new scope of work, and put it back on the street to try to bring it within budget. Prior to that, we just solicited an informal quote from Optech, who is our parks maintenance provider, to see if there was something that they could do to get it within budget. We didn't feel that that was appropriate just to do the one quote, so we put it back out. Received a quote from PE Structures, which y'all are familiar with that. The total was $327,336, which was way over budget. So we are going to request that we don't honor that bid due to budget constraints. After the second formal bid process, we went back and looked at the Optech bid to see if it would be viable. There is a way through the state purchasing where you can single source something if you've gone through the appropriate bidding process and found that there is a quote that's a low enough bid to fit your project. Verified that with our finance director to make sure that we're within budget. So I expect Optech to provide that quote prior to the next voting meeting. But basically what I want to talk about tonight with y'all are the options for the dog park. We are at a point, as we can see by the crowd, that we are going to have to do something. So based on comments from council, we looked at a couple of things that y'all asked us to do. We looked at another location at the park that could house the dog park. Myself and some of the other staff looked at the overall master plan and the basically the geography of Brook Run to see if there was another location that might be more suitable. What we found is that we were going to be running up against some of the same issues based on hydrology, size of the park, tree coverage, just being able to put it anywhere else. We didn't find a viable spot within the park that would be more suitable than where the proposed location is behind the greenhouse complex. So that's our recommendation, is to continue to look at the potential of moving into the proposed site in the foresight plan. One of the other options was to look at the Dog Park Association's proposal. It has a lot of great stuff in it. They did a really good job of making proposals to mitigate a lot of the concerns that we have in that area. The terracing, ground cover, moving the fence away from Lakeview Oaks are good suggestions, and a lot of the things that they recommend would be things that we would do in that area to restore it anyway after the fact that the dog park were removed. Our biggest concern with maintaining the dog park in its current location is how to get that understory vegetation to take root and hold in that area when dogs are continuously playing and running through. The design concept that we did with foresight was to be able to rotate the dogs out of an area of play, just like you would a soccer field or a baseball field, give it a time of rest to be able to restore that area. There will be costs associated with maintaining a new dog park. There will also be costs associated with maintaining the existing dog park. That's part of our operating budget. I don't have a hard cost for either one. A lot of it will be depending on which decision council makes. So our recommendation from staff is to move forward with the relocation of the dog park, move it into an area that is more level, that is easier to maintain, that we believe long-term costs will be lower from an operating standpoint, and we feel that's the best direction. Certainly, whenever council decides, it's a policy decision, is what the Parks Department will carry out. And we are happy to work with the Dog Park Association in any situation, determine the best interest of the city.
Okay. Go ahead, your call, or I can go either.
Okay. So, why is this so loud? I think that the new location creates problems. It's silly to move it from one place, even though it's going to impact a lot fewer homes. And I'm disappointed to hear that there's not a plan C within the park where we could, and I understand that. And sorry. Just keep pushing it. You know, I think Brook Run needs an updated master plan. I know we like to do our plans every 5 years or so, but I think that we could probably use an updated master plan before we start committing this and that. There are best practices for building dog parks. And though the public comment isn't a two-way conversation, I want to explain to the proponents, and I'm neither a proponent or an opponent, of the current dog park location, that it meets virtually none of those best practices. When you do your research, and I have spent dozens of hours reading about dog park siting, when you do your research and you look at what other communities have done in planning and building dog parks, and you understand the history, comma, which by the way has nothing to do with the person who decided to put it there, and comma, that you understand that there was no planning, there was no thought process, a fence was put down. In everything I've ever read, it says do not put it near a neighborhood. That's what it says. And the lack of empathy from some people about the impact of this dog park on the people that live near it is sometimes shocking to me. There has to be a way to negotiate a settlement of some kind that leads to a resolution where we don't cause erosion, we protect our natural resources, and we have a nice park for people to use. This is a wonderful park, but there are lots of dog parks across Metro Atlanta that have virtually no shade, or have the 20% or so that the best practices recommend, that are used by thousands of people as well. This is not the only dog park in Metro Atlanta. The one in Newtown, or whatever it is up there, I've left messages with Alpharetta Parks and Rec today to get their numbers. You may not like those parks, and I can appreciate that, but people use those parks. They're not going empty. So just as though having, and I don't disagree, that sharing a parking lot with the skate and the playground is a horrendous, maybe a terrible idea, that's a best practice as well. And so my desire is for us to come up with a solution that protects our natural resources, that protects the neighbors that were there before the park was put there. It was not done with any thought or any research or any documentation. I urge you to go Google dog park planning. There's actually a book on dog park planning. Someone has written a scholarly book on dog park planning, and read what they say the criteria are for the location and what you're supposed to do. And none of that happened with this park. There was no community input. There was no efforts by DeKalb County to mitigate impacts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As a city, when I ran for office, I told people that I was going to govern by best practices. And I was going to protect homeowners, protect our residents. And I think that when there's a blatant disregard by anybody for what someone else says, it's not right and it's not in the spirit of our community. So, I urge the city, don't love the new location, really don't like the proposed location, which is what I said a few months ago. There has to be a way for us to come to a solution, but this has got to get solved, in my opinion. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, I'm only one person. But this has got to get solved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What is the Brook Run Dog Park, and why is it so special? About 10 years ago, a group of like-minded volunteers gathered together with the purpose of having a special place of their own. Much like the current city of Dunwoody, they worked the political system, they set up a nonprofit organization, staked out boundaries, and toiled for many hours to put into place what is now an extraordinary social center for man and beast alike. The Brook Run Dog Park is primarily a playground for pets, but more importantly, it's a social center for people, and I disagree with the plan for moving it because in doing so, I believe it will kill that community. The current dog park is shaded and cool, which allows friendships time to flourish. It has a gravel walking path, which allows exercise for animals and owners alike. This is not a dog park. It's a people park. It's a social center. It's a senior center, and it has been the birthplace of many marriages. The new location will not have the same amenities, namely the shade. Therefore, it will not have the same draw, and the community will no longer flourish as it currently does. In December, the Brook Run Dog Park Association put forward a compromise plan, which I believe has merit both in cost and in the total scope as being the best plan to move forward to keep this community together, lower the noise, mitigate any supposed environmental damages. I will be voting against moving the dog park and recommend that we revisit the plan presented by the Dog Park Association, as it has a lower overall cost, but more importantly, I believe it is the right thing to do. I'm here to build communities, not kill them.
Anybody else? You guys?
I'm with John.
So prior to this meeting, I revisited every single document we received throughout this process. And there's tons of them. It includes the new design and the variations on it. It includes the Dog Park Association proposal, the position paper from the Lakeview Oaks neighbors, proposals and design input, quite frankly, from other citizens all over Dunwoody. We received a lot of different proposals. We have no shortage of ideas, but reflecting back on the various pros and cons of all the proposals that we've seen so far, none of the options are particularly appealing, including the option of do nothing. So, the question I try to ask all the time is, what problem are we trying to solve? Let's get back to the basics. First and foremost, is the disruptive noise that is rightfully bothersome to the adjacent neighbors of Lakeview Oaks. We on council are the protectors of the community, so fixing and mitigating this noise issue has to be our first priority. Keeping the dog park as it exists today is not an option, just isn't an option. Nor is moving it to a location that transfers the problem to another set of neighbors. And personally, I thought that was a consensus we had after we last considered this on December 9th. Secondarily, we have the erosion and compaction problem, followed by the absence of best practices about separating large and small dogs and rotating the areas. But in my view, as I said, those are secondary to the issue with the neighbors. The noise for the neighbors is a very real problem. So the question is, how do we aggressively move the boundary as far away from the Lakeview Oaks neighbors? They are the affected parties. The Dog Park Association proposal mentioned, if I read it correctly, moving the fence line by another 100 feet or so. But I don't think that's enough. We can make better use of the grassy area near the parking lot. I think we could even consider repurposing a section of the parking lot and incorporating that into the dog park. In short, we can pick up the footprint of the dog park as it exists today and shift it as far to the parking lot, into the section of the parking lot as we can, and move that fence line, and perhaps move the fence line yet in even further. as well as other noise abatement issues that we can do. So this is a compromise that keeps the dog park in the back area of Brook Run, but it's not a request to keep it in the form that it's in today. It is a moving of the dog park, but it moves it, it shifts it from where it is adjacent to Lakeview Oaks, further away from Lakeview Oaks, but keeps it on the backside of Brook Run where there's less traffic and would be less distraction for the dogs. That's an option, that's a variation on the Dog Park Association, but it would be far more aggressive than what's been provided here. The goal here, as I said, is about the noise, and the goal is not to keep it solely in the shade. Dog parks, it's not uncommon that they would be in the shade and be partial, in the sun and partially shaded. And I think they would still provide a good deal of shade. With that, there is no diagram that I have to show. So I don't know what the size is that we're talking about, but I do know that 400 feet is not enough distance with the neighbors. So I'm hopeful that maybe we can go back and take another look at how that might work and what the cost of that would be. It's almost more of a maintenance project really to shift the fences and move it and that sort of thing. And I'll be honest with you, if we end up having to get the maximum distance from Lakeview Oaks and not have a segregated large and small dog, because we don't have that today as it is, to me, the priority should be on the Lakeview Oaks neighbors first and foremost. So those are my 2 cents. I don't know if there's a way that we can turn that into a cost or even a back of the envelope design, but that would be my hope, because all the options that we have today, I don't find them viable, including the Dog Park Association.
Terry, you've got some, we're not trying to figure out where I got to stand here to get this thing so I don't blow everybody's ears out. How many acres do we have in the dog park right now?
It's right around 3 acres.
3 acres. There's in the cities, Roswell, Alpharetta, none of those have a dog park that big. I think number one, when I ran for office, the number one thing was zoning, and the number one thing I said was to protect the residential neighborhood. And I think that one of the things that we always got to ask ourselves is, do I want that next to me? I think that's one of the things. It's always a very, very pertinent question. It's good to come use it and then leave if you don't have to live there. But I think one of the things is that the people were there first, and all of a sudden the dog park got dropped in on them. And we've got 34 neighbors, maybe more there, residents right there. I think the number one priority, as Terry just very well put, is those residents or any of the residents anywhere else in this city. If somebody wants to build a 10-story building right next to a residential area, let me just tell you, I'm going to oppose it till I might be the only person opposing it, but I don't care. I'm going to oppose it because that's what I told the people I'll do, and that's what I'm going to do as long as I'm here. Buffering. Neighborhoods have to be buffered, and that's the way it is. And was it something, Lynn?
No, Lenny.
Oh.
Nothing.
Neighborhoods have to be buffered. And no matter what it is, if it's a dog park or if it's a 6 to 5 or 8-story building, whatever it is, the neighborhoods need to be buffered because, again, protection of the residential neighborhoods in this city is number one priority with me, and I think with most people. I am not, I come from the farm. Some people don't want to hear that out there. That's fine. I probably have as many dogs as any of you. We had all kinds of them. And the last dog we just had died about a year ago. And, I like dogs. It's man's best friend. Sometimes when you're married, it becomes your only friend. You didn't hear that, did you, Mary?
Mary didn't come tonight. That's why you could say that.
But, I guess going back again, I think the rotation is very, very important. I come from the farm. We raised animals. You never put all the animals in one pen and left them there endlessly. It just didn't work because of diseases, killing the grass, killing everything. We moved it. So I think that's another thing. But you know, I don't know how far we can move it up, but definitely, number one, we have to protect the residential neighbors. That's number one. Then, you know, then we can talk about a dog park. Where we can move it, I don't know. How far we can move it, I don't know that either. You know, I don't know any, unless you put up a wall sound barrier, I don't know of any bush, flower, or anything else that will stop the noise of a dog barking. But, you know, the whole thing boils back down to that thing right there. Where can we put it, you know, where it's not going to affect the neighbors or any of the residents? People come first. I'm sorry, folks, but people come first. And where we can move that, how far we can move it up, I don't have an idea either. But, you know, whether we can get 2 1-acre spots and another small spot for small dogs, moving it closer up to the road there, I don't know. But it's something I think we need to look at. And the other thing we need to look at is we need to come up with a plan and we need to step off, because the citizens, we owe that to the citizens, to whether we turn left or right, whatever we do, we've got to get something done, and let's hope we can get it done right.
Yeah, going back to the 12-9 consideration of this, you know, obviously I wasn't on council then, but I was present, and I'm remembering and confirming by going back to my notes that, you know, when this issue was deferred, then I took away that, you know, that we were going to look at alternate locations because of the neighborhood adjacency issue, and that the Peeler neighbors would just become a new adjacency problem versus Lakeview Oaks. And you know, I can't support spending money to move a noise problem from one location to another. And I think we can solve this in another way, you know, in the park. That there's enough, to me, there's enough land there that we can find a home that will get it away from Lakeview Oaks, be an acceptable home, not be next to Peeler where we're creating new problems with different neighbors. And you know, so I guess I'm generally aligned with where Lynn and Terry are at on this, and maybe Denny.
You know, back in June of 2011, the city adopted the Parks Master Plan, and one of the statements that it made was the dog park needs to be relocated where there are areas of lawn and shade to reduce the negative impact of compaction of the tree roots and erosion of the current dog park. A year later, September of 2012, the city adopted the tree inventory and assessment. It was conducted by Arbor Guard tree specialists. And the assessment concludes, should the dog park be continuously used in this way, it can be expected that within 7 to 10 years, all trees in this area will be dead. So we've been warned for 3 years that we need to do something. We paid to have a new park designed, and it looks like none of us are in love with that design, or at least that location. You know, I've spoken, we've heard a few times about the horrendous noise of the fighting dogs and the screaming owners trying to separate the fighting dogs. And the neighbors that lived there, most of them were there long before the dog park came. And I'm convinced, you know, we blame Vernon Jones, but the reality is he gave a crew of guys 1,500 feet of fence and said, go find a place in the park to put it. There was no thought beyond that.
One good thing he did.
So, you know, we have other property. We have a piece of property over behind State Farm at 285, over near the flyover bridge. We have some property across the street over here in Perimeter. You know, I'm looking for a solution that we can save these trees, and wherever we move it, I want to see the trees protected. You know, the picture that Mr. Lockridge brought was, you know, anybody that's been in the dog park has seen that. So we have to do something, and I think that if we kick this can down the road again, we'll all be looking at 3 acres of dead trees, and we're going to be kind of scratching our heads. I wonder how that happened. Well, we know how it happened because we didn't want to fix this problem. So either it's got to move, and Terry's idea may be right. I'm not sure, Brett, if you pulled the map up and moved the fences and seen what you can do. But I think Lakeview Oaks needs to be protected. They were here before the park was. I think we've got to protect whatever trees we do move the park to. You have a fencing idea around the new location. I'd like to see an answer come back pretty soon, and I think that needs to be the consensus. We want an answer back pretty soon. Because my thought is, if we can't get a better location or a better way to do this, that we shut down the dog park in Dunwoody until we come up with a solution. Because if we leave it where it is, those trees will be dead and it'll be our fault. And that's my view. So, you have marching instructions?
I think so. I want to
Clear
make
as
sure I am
mud.
clear. It sounds like consensus is to look at the current dog park location and the plan that's proposed and see what modifications the city staff can make to meet some of council's desires. Move it away from Lakeview Oaks as much as possible. Take into consideration the plans that they've put in place for erosion control, what other concepts we can come up to save the trees, and try to maintain some kind of understory in that location. One thing that was not mentioned is the bathroom facility. That was part of that budget. It's a substantial part of the budget for the dog park. So that's something that council wants to look at, having built in the current dog park location in a modified plan, or if it were to be moved to another location in the park. I personally and professionally don't feel that there is another location in the park where we're not going to have some of the same issues that we have in any location based on the current master plan. There are plans for other areas that if we move the dog park in that area, we may be facing this issue again in 5 years, whether it be basketball courts that need to go in, or multi-use fields, or whatever goes into the park in the future. So I need some clarification from council how far you want me to move in the direction of using the current dog park location, but modifying its footprint in that area, and if you want the restroom building to be considered.
Mr. Mayor. So one of the things I've noticed in the last 6 months as I follow government construction projects around the state is that everybody's seeing this sort of exponential rise in cost. And I had a meeting with somebody from a different government last week, and they talked about the impact the stadiums are going to have on prices.
State Farm.
And State Farm. Maybe they want a State Farm dog park. And so from my perspective, if maybe the bathroom is what we cut at this point, and then, because I think part of what we're sort of struggling with in our capital projects is estimates. And so people see that it was supposed to cost X and now it costs Y, and by God, that's too much money, but the reality is it's X and Y are the same dollars in terms of what it's happened to cost. And so, I have no problem with us not doing the bathrooms at this time, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'd be looking at moving the footprint and not putting in the bathroom at this point. We can always add it at a later point in time. The dog park folks seem to be happy now operating with one, and then if we get resolution of the lawsuit with DeKalb County, then we can look at more costly projects, was my 2 cents.
I just think, I think one of the main reasons we were talking about the bathroom and the location there is because of such things as lemonade days and some other things that may be going in over in that area, right across from the pavilion right now. And I think it's one of the things that's needed in the park right now. We have the bathroom up in the front, and that's basically it. But I think lemonade days has become a major thing. Yeah, you can bring in porta potties, but then there's various other things. The beer fest is over there. Various things that keep coming, and I think there'll be more things coming to the park. And the more things you can bring to the park, the more security you have in the park. So I think that's one of the things that maybe, I don't know, if you just move the fences and stuff like that, if you got enough for, 2 1-acre plot parks and a 0.4 or whatever it was, the other for small dogs. Alpha Red, I think, is one of theirs is 1 acre, one of them's 1.15. So that's, you know, and I can't remember what Roswell's were, but I just talked to them too. But I think that's one of the things that, you know, the bathrooms, Doug, I'm kind of thinking that might get a heck of a lot of use from a lot of things that are coming in there into the park.
Yeah, what do you? Comment?
Yes.
Look at John.
Thank you, Brent. All I would ask is that you work closely with the dog park, start with their plan, look at the fence line in which they've drawn to you, and then go back to them and try to work in cooperation with them to save as much shade as possible, because again, I know for a fact that that's one of the things that makes that park, you know, possible. And finally, if you could, at some point, the Brook Run Dog Park Association, the nonprofit that runs that area, I would like to ask that they someday be considered to be a formal organization in which they can get city funds. We have a $200,000 grant program that we give to our nonprofits that actually operate on our Dunwoody property, and that they at some point be considered part of a partnership program to make it long-term. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor. So this is where your job gets hard. Because you're hearing really kind of contradicting things. I want you to work with the Dog Park Association. I want you to work with Lakeview Oaks. And I think multiple people up here have spoken to the need, the first priority being the neighbors and the community. And so just keep that in mind is, you know, we have to, I won't support a plan, and I think some of the other council people won't either, though I can't speak for them, that doesn't put the needs of the neighbors first. And so, you know, I want you to keep as much shade as you can, as long as we can protect the trees. But I want the needs of the community that abuts the property to be taken into consideration.
When you were articulating what you thought you heard, I want to be sure what I was speaking from. Don't know if the rest of council agrees, but I think consensus may be, and that is when I go out and look at the parking lot that we have today, it's kind of an L shape, and I think we can repurpose that part of the parking lot next to the grassy area, that particular section, because it's a lot easier to find alternative parking if more parking is needed than it is to move it all apart. So,
You want a six-pack to go home with? Or?
I wanted a cooler.
So you, is that clear?
It's not. Right.
No, actually, it's a work tomorrow. And, you know,
Can we have it
city staff
tomorrow?
is more than happy to work with the Dog Park Association. They're absolutely phenomenal part of what we do in Brook Run, and I'm happy to have them. So I know a lot of times we don't always see eye to eye on what's best for the dog park, but we all want the same things. It's just finding the right